My
2
daughter
days
didn't
after we
bother to
buried
lower
my
her
husband,
voice the
my
morning
only
she
child
decided I
looked
was
me
no
in the
longer
face
welcome
and told me I no
Pack up,
longer
Mom,
belonged in the
Lila
life I
said,
had
drumming
built.
her manicured
You'll
fingers
be
on the
fine
marble
somewhere
island,
else,
he
as if she
said,
were keeping
pressing
time
cash
for a
into my
parade I
hand
wasn't
like a
invited
receipt.
to. My name
Grant
is
and I
Eleanor
finally
Price.
hit the jackpot.
I am 68.
We'll
and
arrange
for
one
4
of those
decades
senior
I
places
cooked
for
dinners,
you. It'll be
balanced,
easier.
quiet books.
Grant leaned in the
learned
doorway,
names of
smiling
repairmen
with the
and
bright brittle
pharmacies,
look of a man
and kept
who'd
storms
just seen
from
a door
blowing the
open
roof off our
and
small
assumed
universe.
the whole house was
Thomas,
his.
my husband,
We'll
had
make
been
sure you're
gone less than
comfortable,
48
he added the word
hours when
comfortable
Lucas and his
landing
wife
like a
Ivy
stamp on a
began
shipping
speaking
label.
about our home
They
as if
expected
it were a
pleading.
theme to be redecorated.
Instead, I laughed
They did
quiet
not
at first,
shout.
then fuller the
They did
kind
not
that
have
comes
to.
from a place you forget you
They
own.
walked the rooms with a tape measure
I
and a
set my
soft
hand on the
cruelty,
strap of my
deciding
old
which
purse
furniture
and
was
asked,
dated and
"Before
which
you
walls would
redecorate
open
my
up the
life,
light.
did either of
I
you
stood
notice
in the
whose name
hallway
is
with
printed
2
on that little
suitcases
scrap
and a
of
small
paper
wooden
for a
box that
heartbeat
held their
Thomas's
certainty
pocket
flickered?
watch?
If you're wondering
The
how a
watch had warmed in my
66-year-old
palm on
widow ended
hospital
up in a
nights.
scene like that,
It was ordinary
well,
brass
stories
nicked
rarely
at the
start
edges,
at the moment
ticking with
they
a
explode.
stubbornness that
Mine
outlived
began
every
weeks earlier in
diagnosis.
Charleston,
Lucas
where the
pressed
air and
2 crisp
December
hundreds
tastes of
against
salt
my
and
palm.
memory. Be
My
independent,
name is
Mom.
Nora
You'll
Whitfield.
adapt.
For most of my
Ivy
life, I was
smiled
a
the way
reference
people
librarian.
smile when they are already
After
late for the
Harold
next
died, I
thing.
learned to carry quiet like
Independence,
a coat.
as they used it, meant
A year
departure.
ago, when I retired and sold the
I
small
nodded
blue
to keep from
townhouse where
breaking.
Lila grew up,
Sunlight slid
I
across
moved
the
into the
hardwood I had
renovated
polished
carriage house
1,000
behind her
times.
grand white porched
I looked
home.
once without
A
asking
win-win,
permission to
Grant
remember.
called it.
I did not
I
argue.
would be close to family.
Arguing would have made me
In
small
practice,
in the
it meant
space
my
I had
pension
enlarged
flowed
for
through their
decades.
accounts while I
Outside the
cooked
trunk
baby
of their
fat and
silver
made the
car
house
popped
look
open.
effortless.
Invoices
Lucas tossed
appeared
my
each
bags
month
with
if
my
they
name
were
at
the
the
wrong
top,
deliveries,
typed to the right
neatly by a
address.
son-in-law who treated
He
kinship
mentioned
like a
utilities and
contract.
lawn services like a
I
manager
told myself
taking
it was
over a
temporary,
file.
that love was a kind of
I kept the
interest
box
that would
with the watch
eventually
in
be
my
paid
lap.
back.
The
Then
lids
the
hinged,
suggestion
clicked in time
started
with
maybe
my
a
breath.
senior
The
community
motel
across
was the
town,
kind that lists
more
its amenities
activities
on a
more
sign
independence,
and keeps them barely working.
as if I were a misplaced
I set my
knickknack cluttering
suitcases
their
by the
shelf.
dresser, put the
Through
wooden
it all,
box
I
on the
held on to
nightstand
one
and
small
slid
ritual
the lock until it clicked.
Every
I
Friday
counted the
for
money,
nearly 3 decades.
200.
I walked to the same corner store
I
and
folded
bought a
it
lottery
into a
ticket
square
with
and
number
tucked it
stitched
beneath
to my
the
life
box
dates
the way you
only I
slide a
could
note
note
like
under
a
a
secret
door.
braid.
In the
It
bathroom,
wasn't
the mirror
magical
had been
thinking
wiped more
so
often
much as
than
a
it had
promise
been
I made
cleaned.
myself keep a
I
sliver of
dabbed
hope
water
that
on my
belongs to
face,
no one
then
else.
came back and
On a
opened the
damp,
box.
pearly evening,
To Eleanor, the
newscaster's
engraving
smile
read
was
for
too
hours
bright
we
for the
shared,
hour,
and those we
tonight's
didn't get
jackpot
to.
is $48
I
million,
wound the
she
stem
sang
and
as
held
the
the
numbered
watch to my
balls
ear.
rolled like planets.
Time made its quiet
6,
case with no interest in
12,
anyone's opinions.
27, 39,
Seconds do not care who owns a house.
Powerball.
They
At
only
first,
ask to
I
be
thought the
kept.
thud in my
A
chest
memory
was
arrived
age
Lucas
reminding
at
me
8
to
feverish
sit.
on the couch.
I reached
Winter
for my
my
purse
purse unfolded
against
the
the
window
ticket
glass,
crease,
soft at the
I
edges
sat
from
on the
being
floor
carried,
beside
and
him
lined
and
the numbers
counted
up
us.
again and again
Thomas called from
until
the
the
study,
tremor in
asking
my
what we
hand
needed.
steadied into clarity.
Crackers,
I had
ginger
won.
ale, caution.
The room didn't
Back
tilt.
in the room, I pressed
The
the cool
magnolia
case to my
outside
cheek
didn't
until
burst
my
into
heartbeat
song.
synchronized with the
What
watch.
came was quieter space.
Panic should have been loud.
A sense that I could
Instead,
set
there
things
was
down,
room in my chest
and they
where
would
it
not
might
be
have been.
snatched away.
I found a notepad on the desk.
My first
and wrote a
impulse,
short
trained
list
by
in the
years of
tidy
being
hand I
Lila's
used for
mother, was
school
to share the
forms,
news to
late
call her like I
keys, bank
used to on
statements,
mornings
call
when she
Mr.
was small
Calloway.
and the world was gentle.
Lists are how I anchor
Then
days
I
when
saw,
storms
as
try to
if
pull them
from
out to
above
sea.
the ledger of the last
I
year,
tore the
party
sheet and
trays
slid
I
it under the
arranged and
box with
carried
the
the
money.
laundry folded.
I spoke a
while
quiet
neighbors
prayer with
praised
no
how
fancy
seamlessly
clauses.
their home ran the word
Keep me
independence
upright.
packaged as
Keep
absence.
me kind.
The ticket slid
Keep me
back into
clear.
my wallet behind an old
When
photo
the
of
prayer
a
finished, I
gap-toothed
lay
girl
on the
on a
bedspread
swing.
patterned in blue
I pressed
diamonds
my
and
thumb
listened
over
to
her
the air
smile.
conditioner rattle.
We'll
Morning
do this
arrived
right, I
pale.
told the quiet room.
I took the bus
Not
because
for
pride
vengeance,
like
though, that
taxi fare
temptation
isn't
glows
glows
hot
hot saved for
when you've been made
emergencies.
invisible, but for
I wore the
dignity.
gray coat with deep
For the
pockets
version
and
of
kept the
me who
watch
had
in the
kept
left
faith
one.
with a handful of numbers
Downtown,
and
a
a
brick
weekly
building
walk.
with brass letters
Sleep stayed
housed
away.
Calloway and
I
Finch
watched fog
attorneys at
move
law.
through the trees like slow water
The
and
bell over
listened
the
to the
door
house
gave a
breathe the main
restrained ring
home
as I
loud,
stepped
with
inside.
plans that were
The
never
receptionist
mine, and my
asked my
small
name
rooms
and I
out
gave it
back,
to her like
where a
something
person
I
could hear
decided
her
to
own
claim
name.
again.
By
Eleanor
morning, I had a
Price.
plan to protect
She
what was
checked a
finally
screen and
mine to
asked me to
protect.
wait.
What I
I
didn't
sat and
plan
looked at
for
the
was
framed
how quickly their
photographs.
greed would
A
sniff
door
out the
opened
scent
down
of
the
change.
corridor.
I
Mrs.
didn't
Price
sleep
Mr.
so much as
Calloway
float
stood
half awake,
silver
half
inside,
inside,
the
the
hush
hush
that follows a storm
no one else
anchor.
has noticed
I'm
yet.
glad you came, he said.
By the time the light came
I stepped
thin
into
and
his
pearled through the
office.
blinds, I had brewed
Bookcases
coffee I
lined
didn't
one
drink
wall.
and folded dish
A
towels that
chessboard
didn't
waited
need
mid-game
folding
on a side table.
The ticket lay where
He
I
poured
tucked it
coffee
in a
and
narrow
set the cup
sleeve
within
behind an
reach.
old
I
photograph
was told
of a
I should
gap-toothed
rest, I
girl on a
said.
swing.
We'll start by putting
I
you back
touched
into
the
the
edge
sentence
once
like checking a
concern you,
pulse.
he said.
At 8:13,
Then
we'll
lilac
make sure they
texted
can't
no
be edited
greetings
without
without
your
your
consent.
consent. He slid a
Come.
folder toward me.
It was
I'll
the
make
tone of a
calls.
manager
Come back at
assigning a
3.
task.
We'll review
I
everything.
looked out at the
I set
magnolia
the
leaves
pocket
shiny
watch
with
beside the
mist and
folder.
typed back,
Its
"Sure."
ticking was the only
I
clock
said yes
that mattered
out of
to me.
habit, and also
3, I
because
said.
habits are how we
Not a
smuggle
plea,
time until we can
an
choose
appointment.
otherwise. When I
She was
stepped
already
back
in
onto
the
the
SUV
sidewalk,
when I came
the
down the
winter
path
sun had
from the
edged up the
carriage house
brickwork,
heater,
thin and
blasting radio
stubborn.
low.
I tucked
We'll
the
be
watch
quick,
into my
she said,
pocket and
eyes
stood
straight
straighter
ahead.
than I had
We're
in
having
days.
people over this weekend.
There would be
I
time
need
later for
cheeses,
anger or
olives, that
softness.
rosemary cracker Grant
For now,
likes.
there was paper
Of course,
to
I
gather.
said, fastening my belt.
At 3 o'clock,
She
I
didn't ask
returned
how
to
I'd
Callaway
slept.
and Finch with
I
my
didn't
gray
bring it up
coat
either.
buttoned to the throat, and Thomas's
We rode in a
watch heavy
silence
in my
that wasn't
pocket.
quiet so much as
The
crowded with
receptionist
years
with
of
the tidy
small
bun
emissions
looked up
and the
before I
soft
reached
clink
the
of her
desk,
ring,
as
she
if she
now
had been
wore more like
expecting
a
the
badge
exact
than a
cadence
promise.
of my steps.
At the store, Lila walked
Mrs.
fast.
Price, she said,
She had a
Mr.
way of
Calloway
moving
is
through
ready.
aisles as if she were
She
the one
offered water
arranging
I
them.
didn't take and
She
led me
swept
down a
brie and
corridor
honeycomb
bright
and
with
smoked
framed
almonds into
diplomas
the
and the
cart,
kind
her
of
voice
carpet
running
that
through
absorbs
lists,
secrets.
corrections.
Mr.
Little
Calloway
smiles
stood
she
in his
practiced
doorway
for
with
checkout
one hand
clerks
on
in
the
the
frames,
frame,
who'd
silver
report
hair
back
neat
that she
jacket
was so put
buttoned.
together, just
The
like her
chessboard
mother
on the
used to
side
be.
table still
I
held a
trailed
match
a
in
step
progress,
behind, catching
an
the
item
item
she
poised
flung
as if
too
considering
quickly,
whether
placing
honor
them so
should
they
go
wouldn't
forward or
bruise each
turn
other on the
aside.
ride home.
"Please come in," he
"Coupons,"
said.
she said at the
Closed the
register,
door.
already
He
reaching
did not
for her
sit at
wallet, then
first.
glancing toward my
"Before
bag.
we rate anything,
"You
you
always
should
have
know
some
this
tucked
notice
away.
about a will
They're in the
conference
side
was
pocket,"
issued
I
last
said,
week.
and reached at the
It was
same time
returned
she did.
undeliverable.
My
Someone
fingers
answered our
brushed the worn
follow-up
leather
and said you
strap.
were.
Her manicure
He looked
flashed
for a
like
word
small
gentler
blades.
than the one he had been
She
given.
pulled the purse closer and without waiting slid her hand into the pocket, where I keep the week's odds and ends, a folded church bulletin, a pencil nub, grocery slips, and for one dangerous breath that sleeve with the photograph and the thing behind it. "Mom let me." She stopped, her hand stilled. A square of paper tilting at the corner cream against the lining. She pinched it delicately, almost reverently, and drew it out into the fluorescent light. "The ticket." For a second her face emptied. People talk about blood draining, but with Lila it was like color had been rehearsing an exit and finally took its cue. She stared at the numbers as if they were a spell, and she had suddenly remembered every syllable. "Do you—" Her voice tried to find a register and failed. "Do you know what this is?" "I do," I said, and placed a carton of eggs gently on the belt. The cashier looked up, then away, that practiced kindness of someone who senses a family matter and decides not to be enlisted. Lila pressed her lips together, paid, and stuffed receipts into her bag with clumsy fingers. We walked out under a sky that couldn't decide whether to rain, the parking lot shining darkly like a promise made by someone you shouldn't trust. In the car, she held the ticket in both hands as if it were fragile, and also as if squeezing it might force it to obey. She didn't speak all the way home. I watched her watch the road and then glance down. Watch the road and glance down again, as if the numbers might perform tricks if she kept them in her peripheral vision. The moment we turned into the driveway, she didn't park so much as fling the car toward the curb. She left the groceries in the trunk, bolted up the front steps, and caught on the brass handle. "Grant," she called the name ricocheting down the hallway. "Grant, come here now." He appeared, fast shirt, still tucked, styled casual like a catalog man, who must not show the effort it takes to be effortless. "What's he started?" And then she held up the ticket, like a priest lifts a host. "It's the numbers," she said, breathless. "It's the numbers from last night." Grant's eyes skimmed the paper, then narrowed with concentration that looked very close to hunger. He pulled out his phone and scrolled mouth, moving soundlessly as he compared sequence to sequence. 6, 12, 27, 39, 44. 19, he said at last. Each word a rung on a ladder he'd already begun to climb. He looked up, and in the look, I could see the battery of his imagination surge houses, boats, the ability to slam doors without worrying who was on the other side. "This changes everything," he said softly, not to me. I stood in the doorway, cool air sneaking in at my ankles. Between us, the kitchen glowed glossy stone chrome, the copper pot set. Lila insisted on, but never used. I could smell rosemary crackers even though we'd left them in the trunk. Some part of me, the part that knows ovens and stains and recipes that don't end in showmanship, wanted to go fetch the groceries before the cream softened and the greens wilted. I stayed where I was. "We'll need to call someone," Lila said, already moving in a small, efficient circle. "An advisor, a planner, maybe a news station. We'll put out a statement. The kids need new schools, real ones with smaller classes. And the house grant we've talked about, the one on the battery." He laughed, a crack in the ice. "And maybe, Lila, we can finally arrange something for your mom. Something nice. A top-tier senior place, full-staff healthcare, fitness classes. She'll be taken care of. We'll be able to breathe." They turned to me then with a synchronized benevolence that would have fooled strangers. "You'll have your own space, Mom," Lila said the word space, pressing down instead of making room. "You won't have to fuss with chores. You'll have activities, painting, yoga. It's better for everyone." They had already moved me out of their kitchen and into an institution in their minds. It took 3 seconds. They looked relieved. I stepped forward and held out my hand. "May I see it?" I asked gently. Lila hesitated, then passed the ticket to me as if passing me back my own name. I read the numbers once more because ritual isn't only about belief. It's also about anchoring the present to something true. Then I turned the ticket over and ran my thumb along the blank strip. "This is in my name," I said. "I bought it, with my money. The same numbers I've played every Friday for nearly 30 years. The room shifted, not dramatically, the island didn't tip, the copper pots didn't crash, but the air itself tightened. Mom, Lila tried with the patient tone she uses on customer service representatives. "We can put it in the family trust. We can manage it. You don't need to worry about paperwork. We'll handle everything and send me where you think I belong," I asked steady. Grant's smile vanished. He wasn't a man who liked to be corrected, especially by someone he had categorized as an accessory. "Let's be rational," he said. Family shares. That's how it works. For a year, I said I've paid you $1,300 a month from my pension to live in a building you call a cottage when you're describing it to friends in a unit, when you're itemizing the taxes. I've cooked, cleaned, watched the children, and stepped out of the way when your guests arrived because you thought old age ruins a photograph's composition. Lila's jaw worked. That's unkind. It's accurate, I said, and slipped the ticket back into my wallet, into the sleeve behind the swinging girl. I'm not asking you for anything. I'm telling you that this does not belong to you. Grant took a step as if to close the distance, then thought better of it. His voice cooled. We can fight this, he said. We can argue undue influence, mental competency, provenance of funds. Maybe the court would like to hear how you've been living on our property for a year. It isn't a court's job to distribute a lottery ticket to the person who shouts loudest, I said. I bought it. I have the receipt from the corner store if anyone wants to comb through my Friday afternoons. And I have a pen. I pulled one from my purse, clicked it, and calmly signed the back of the ticket, with my name each letter like a rung I climbed back into my life. Lila flinched. She knew enough to know what a signature means. There was a long moment when no one moved. Outside, a mockingbird practiced 2 wrong songs at once, and then corrected itself. Inside, Grant's face flushed, and then went pale. Lila's eyes shone not with tears yet, but with that first wetness people call emotion, when what they mean is disappointment curdling into blame. Mom, she said after a while, gentler, this can still be good. We're scared. We made it sound wrong. She glanced at Grant, let me handle this, and he nodded. Let's sit down tonight with some ideas. There are taxes to consider. There's planning. We can make you comfortable, and you can help us get out from under, you know. She stopped herself before she said the mess we made. I'll be comfortable, I said, but not because you place me somewhere, because I choose. Grant tried a different tack charm. Let us get lunch, he said. My treat. We'll celebrate. I noticed he said my as if generosity could rebrand entitlement. I'm going to put the groceries away, I said, and left them in the sparkling kitchen with their bright plans fading fast. In my small rooms, I locked the door and sat at the little table where the afternoon light falls in a cathedral shape. I took the ticket out one more time, signed now legal in the only way that matters to a piece of paper. I slid it into a plain envelope, wrote my name on the front, and then, because I have worked in a library long enough to know that where is a story's truest sentence, I hid the envelope not in the obvious places, but under the lining of a flour tin whose lid squeaks in protest. If anyone found the tin at all, they'd stop at the lid. Then I pulled out a notebook, the cheap kind with a marbled cover I buy by the pack, and made a list with 3 columns. What is mine, what I owe, what I will no longer do. Under mine I wrote my name, my time, my quiet. This ticket, my right to say no. Under O, respect kindness, but only where it is returned. Under no longer laundry lists that aren't mine, parties where I serve and disappear allowances for cruelty called honesty. I breathed. The room steadied. What followed were the oddest 3 days of my life, not because anything dramatic happened, but because it didn't. Lila brought me coffee in the mornings, which she never does, and told me to take it easy. Grant asked my opinion about paint colors, as if I had ever been allowed to choose a hue in their house. They left glossy brochures on my table, active living by the bay, with tasteful photos of women my age sipping tea in rooms where nothing sharp could happen. I found a plate of still warm cookies one afternoon, each one rounder than anything Lila had baked before. I took a bite and tasted bakery. They were careful not to bring up the ticket directly. They said the situation and our future and your comfort capitalized in their voices. At dinner, Lila announced she'd scheduled a meeting with a financial professional who specializes in sudden wealth transitions and looked at me as if I should be grateful she'd included me in a plan that required my money to exist. I won't be attending, I said. Silence hummed like a refrigerator. Mom, she said, be reasonable. I'm being careful, I said. Those two aren't enemies. They're just not the same thing. Grant tried again this time with a folder he'd labeled in block letters. He had drawn up budgets not for me, but for them, pages of numbers that ended with requests for signatures on documents he described vaguely as authorizations. When I refused, he laughed in that way that isn't amusement so much as disbelief that a script isn't being followed. You're making this adversarial, he said. No, I said. I'm keeping it honest. That night, I called Teresa Klein, the one friend from the library who never lost the habit of listening harder than she talked. When I told her in a thin, amazed voice what had happened, she didn't squeal or scold. She asked if I'd signed the ticket. Yes. If I had told anyone beyond Lila and Grant. No. If I had a lawyer. I did, I said, years ago, after Harold died. Then you still do, she said. They don't stop being lawyers because the sad part ends. Call him first thing. And until you talk to him, keep the paper where only you can find it. Under the flower, I said. She laughed softly. Of course it is. I slept some that night, full sleep, the kind that wraps you, not because life is easy, but because you have employed yourself as its steward. I dreamed of the aisle at the corner store of the bell that rings when you open the door of Lena, who has run that register for 20 years, handing me my ticket with a wink she always means. In the morning, I stood in the doorway of the carriage house with the phone in my hand and the magnolia reflecting light onto the path. I scrolled and found the number Franklin Moore Attorney. It had been long enough since I used it that the phone asked if I wanted to update contact. I pressed call and listened to it ring. Moore and Amos, a woman's voice said bright and professional. How may I direct your call? This is Nora Whitfield, I said. I was a client. I need to speak with Mr. Moore if he's available. I almost said urgent, but the word felt like panic. It's important, I said instead. And it's time. She put me on hold to the softest piano I'd ever heard in a law office. When she came back, she sounded pleased, as if the world sometimes aligns. Mr. Moore has a cancellation at 11:15. Can you be here then? Yes, I said. I can be there. I wrote the time on my notebook, the marbled one, under a new column I'd labeled next. Then I took the envelope out of the flour tin. And for the first time since I tucked it, there felt how thin paper is and how strong a name can be when you give it back to yourself. I signed the edge of the envelope too, not because it was necessary, but because sometimes ritual is just a way to keep your hands steady on the wheel. When I stepped outside, Lila was already walking toward the carriage house with a glass of sweet tea in her hand, the kind she imagines is my favorite, because she pours sugar over apology and calls it Southern. Morning, she sang. I thought you might like. I have an appointment, I said, locking my door behind me. Downtown. With the advisor. Her smile flickered and regathered. With my lawyer, I said. She paused just a heartbeat too long, then composed herself. Great, she said brightly, too brightly. We love that you're being proactive. I asked and moved past her toward the path. She followed. Mom, I know I sounded transactional the other day. I'm sorry. She offered me the glass. The ice clinked politely. We just want to make sure this is handled correctly. For you. Correctly, I said, is my favorite word. I set the tea on the porch rail and kept walking. Behind me, I could feel her watching, calculating, and then pulling out her phone to text Grant a message that would begin with, she's going to, and end with, we need to. The mist had lifted. The sky had settled into a clean winter blue, frank and unadorned. I breathed it in like something earned. Downtown, the streets were damp, the harbor sending up that mineral scent that makes your mouth aware of the ocean's long patience. I parked in a lot behind a red brick building with a brass plaque, a place that looked like it had been there long enough to remember when men wore hats. On the steps, a woman in a navy blazer held the door and smiled the kind of smile you don't learn from customer service videos. Ms. Whitfield, she said, right on time. I try to be, I said, and glanced once out across the rooftops, in the direction of the river where light was moving like a promise no one could touch. Mr. Moore is ready for you, she said, and led me down a hall where the carpet muffled regret and amplified the small sound a person makes when she clears her throat to say what finally must be said. I wasn't trembling now. I carried the envelope under my arm, not hidden but held. I understood in the simplest way I have ever understood anything that what I was about to do was not about money. It was about the right to keep company with your own name. It was about the mathematics of respect to add it or everything subtracts. When the office door opened and Franklin rose silver at the temples, the same kindness at the corners of his eyes, I realized I had been holding my breath since the numbers fell on the screen. I let it out. He extended his hand. Nora, he said, tell me what's happened. I placed the envelope on the desk between us like a seed and began. Franklin didn't reach for the envelope right away. He watched me the way good librarians watch patrons who've come to the desk with a question that isn't really about books. Tell me everything in the order you remember it, he said. So I did the aisle at the corner store, the numbers rolling like planets. The quiet afterwards, the grocery trip. Lila's hand in my purse, Grant's eyes narrowing to a point the way the word space can mean absence if you don't handle it with care. When I finished, he nodded once as if he'd heard a symphony, hit its last bar, and knew it would still be ringing a minute from now. You signed the ticket, he asked. I did, I said, and slid the envelope forward. He opened it, glanced at the back, and his mouth tucked into the kind of smile men reserve for a plan that is both lawful and merciful. Good. First things first, we'll secure it in a safe deposit box today. Then we'll file the claim through a trust so your name isn't a party trick for every microphone in the county. We'll get you a new phone, a post office box freezes on your credit, and a plan for how to say yes or no without apologizing either way. He set the ticket gently beside his blotter, then turned to a slim leather folder already waiting on his desk. And there's something I've been keeping for you, he said. Better to show than to preface. He slid out a stack of papers bound with a brass fastener. I saw dates, bank logos, lines of small patient numbers. Nora, he said, your Aunt Beatrice set up a discretionary trust for you shortly before she died. She asked me to withhold disclosure until I believed you were either in need or at risk of being exploited. It has been invested conservatively. As of last quarter, it stands at $256,000, plus accrued interest likely to post next month. For a beat, I saw my aunt as she was in the earliest mornings, brushing her hair into a soft twist, humming the hymn her mother used to hum, putting sugar in her coffee, as if sweetness were not a luxury but a duty. She never said a word, I whispered. She didn't want gratitude to feel like performance, he said. She wanted you to have a floor. I sat back and let that settle. To have been carrying laundry and invoices and a tinny form of gratitude while a quiet net waited beneath me made my throat tight. I hadn't been wrong all year. I had simply been outnumbered. Franklin tapped another folder. One more thing. You know I never gossip. But due diligence isn't gossip. Grant's company, Grantworth Realty, has reported operating losses for the last 3 years. He filed extensions on his taxes he never properly completed. The Department of Revenue recorded a lien for $69,000 and some change in back taxes, interest, and penalties. The house has a first mortgage and a home equity line almost maxed. There are late notices on 2 of their credit cards. I can obtain certified copies of the relevant filings. The numbers on the page didn't shout. They didn't need to. They sat there like facts do, unglamorous and unafraid. They were counting on my pension as a monthly patch, I said. Now they're counting on $48 million as a miracle. He folded his hands. A miracle isn't an exemption from arithmetic. Here's what I propose. He spoke plainly in bullet points without needing to draw the bullets. 1 safe deposit box today. 2 file claim via a newly formed trust with a neutral name. 3 establish a personal trust and a living will. 4 document your living situation for the past year. 5 avoid signing or authorizing anything set in front of you at home. 6 decide whether and how you want your story told publicly. I must have hesitated at that last one because he added, you don't owe anyone your voice, but predators thrive in shadow. If you want to speak, I can introduce you to a reporter who will put truth before spectacle. And if you'd rather remain a quiet roomer with a solid bank balance, we can arrange that too. What I want, I said, surprised by the steadiness in my own voice, is to stop being erased in my own house. However we do that. We do it by reclaiming nouns, he said, name, home choice. He called his assistant. Within the hour, the ticket was tucked into a box behind a vault door that took 3 keys and a turn of the wrist that felt ceremonial. We signed the papers to form the trust, Whitfield Harbor Trust Neutral, almost dull. I liked that. Dull things aren't appetizing to the greedy. Back at the office, he walked me through timelines, how long the lottery authority would take to verify when the funds would clear, how taxes would be withheld. He suggested reasonable percentages and safeguards. Then he leaned back. Tonight, he said, let them show you who they are. You don't have to do more than tell the truth. I drove home with my window cracked, breathing air that smelled faintly of metal and tide. When I turned into the drive, the estate looked as it always did. Plank fence wide enough to squeak, wide porch, wrapping the house like a smile that couldn't quite reach the eyes. The groceries we'd abandoned had been brought in. Someone had arranged the cheeses on a board and garnished them with rosemary as if aesthetics could be ethics. On my table in the carriage house lay a binder with tabs, budget transitions, housing options. Lila and Grant had been busy. I put water on for tea and read every page. None of the budgets included a line item for Nora's choice. The transition section had glossy brochures for active living communities circled in pen. One had a cheerful photo of a woman doing chair yoga. The caption said, "Find freedom in support." I've never seen a sentence work so hard to call absence a kind of liberty. At 7, Lila texted family meeting living room. There was a heart emoji. People will use any shape to make an edict look soft. I carried a manila envelope instead of a casserole. When I walked into the living room, candles were lit and a bottle of wine breathed on the sideboard. Grant wore an open-throated shirt. Lila stood when I entered the way polite people stand for judges and grandparents when it's showtime. "Mom," she said, tone carefully neutral, "we put together a plan so nothing feels chaotic. We want you to feel safe." I set my envelope down and opened it. On the coffee table, side by side, with her tabs and stock photos, I laid certified copies Franklin had arranged to be couriered, the lien, the loss statements, the mortgage schedules, the letterhead that turns rumor into record. Grant leaned forward, face going the color of the paper. Lila didn't touch anything. She read with her eyes and kept her hands folded on her lap, like a child who has just been told not to knock down a house of cards. "I know," I said, "not every number, but the shape of them." Nora Grant started aiming for a laugh that would break the spell. "This is context-free. Business has cycles. The last 3 years have been, your cycles have been subsidized by my pension," I said. "Your plan is to replace the patch with a parachute you didn't pack." "That's uncharitable," Lila said, but her voice was soft, a woman trying to walk on ice that knows her weight. "It's precise," I said. "I won't be signing your authorizations. I won't be moving where you place me like a vase you finally admit doesn't match the drapes. Whatever comfort I buy will be chosen by me. Silence opened a clean, bright space I didn't feel obligated to fill. Grant went first. He went loud. You would put your grandchildren at risk to prove a point, he said. We brought you into our home. You brought my money into your budgets, I said. You sent me a bill for living in a house whose laundry I folded. Lila closed her eyes. When she opened them, she tried a different script. Mom, she said we were scared. We said things in a way that sounded cold. I'm sorry. We want to do this as a family. Family is a verb, I said. It's how you act when no one's filming. As if on cue, a light splashed across the front windows, white moving. Then another. Voices rose at the gate, amplified by metal and night. Lila went to the window and peered through the sheer. She drew a breath that sounded like a thread being pulled too fast. There are vans, she said, news vans. Of course there were. Charleston has a way of delivering a crowd precisely when the script says, private. Grant swore softly and straightened his shirt. He glanced at the papers on the table, gathered them into a messy stack, and tucked them beneath a cushion. It was the funniest thing he did all night, hide paperwork as if paper were a spell and upholstery a counterspell. He turned to Lila. We get in front of this, he said. We speak first. I stood. No, I said. It came out without heat, a fact that didn't need witnesses. But Lila was already smoothing her hair, that automatic motion women learn the day the world tells us appearances are a currency. I'll say something simple, she said. We're grateful our family is blessed. We ask for privacy. You can say we, I said, until it stands up and asks for its name to be correct. They moved toward the porch in a sort of practice duet, Grant in front, Lila at his shoulder. I followed at a distance that meant I wasn't hiding and wasn't endorsing. Beyond the iron gate, microphones jutted like flowers in a strange garden. Lights clicked in and out. A young reporter in a bright coat rehearsed phrases into her phone, then tucked it away and lifted her chin. Ms. Whitfield, she called, or maybe she said, Mrs. in a crisis. People grab whichever syllable they think will steady the air. Grant reached the gate first. We appreciate you coming, he said, hand on the iron voice, pitched to sound neighborly and in control. As a family, we're taking time to process what this means. Are you the winner? Someone called. We're grateful, he said again, smiling at the cameras. We'll use it wisely. Lights swung toward Lila. She stepped forward, lit like a debut. This is a blessing, she said. Our family. I stepped up beside them and put my palm flat on the iron. It was cold. The gate hummed with the electricity of cameras in anticipation. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't have to. Microphones know when a person isn't performing. My name is Nora Whitfield, I said. The winning ticket is in my name. I bought it with my money using numbers I've played every Friday for almost 30 years. The air shifted small, real. You can feel the moment a story leaves rumor and finds a spine. Questions flew, but I kept going because if you stop to answer one, you'll be written by the person who asked it. For the last year, I said I have lived in the carriage house behind my daughter's home. I have paid her husband $1,300 a month from my pension for the privilege. I have cooked their meals, done their laundry, watched their children, and been asked to make myself scarce when guests came so I wouldn't interrupt the picture they were selling. This money doesn't change anything for them. It changes everything for me. Nora, Lila said under her breath, almost a hiss. This is true, I said. A woman at the back. Older, not there to preen, lowered her microphone a few inches and looked at me. Just look the way you look at a neighbor across a fence when you finally name the thing you've both been pretending not to see. The young reporter in the bright coat swallowed and asked carefully, What will you do next? Ms. Whitfield, live where I choose, I said, and not apologize for it. Behind me, I felt Grant stiffen. He understood PR the way boys understand capes. He stepped forward and tried to retake the scene, but scenes aren't things you can repossess once truth has been spoken plainly in winter air. Respectfully, he said we would appreciate privacy. And accountability, I added, not looking at him. I didn't wait for the follow-ups. You don't have to stay to watch a story be edited in real time. I turned, walked back up the path, and closed the door to the carriage house with the ease of a person who knows she can open it again. Almost immediately, my phone buzzed. Teresa saw the clip. You were clear and kind. Clear is rare. Then, a second message, need help packing boxes, I make a mean label. I smiled and wrote back, soon, very soon. There was a tap at my door, a light one, the knock of a daughter who wants to be a child again for 3 minutes. I opened it. Lila stood there, hair not quite perfect, eyes too bright. Mom, she said, voice low, can we talk without the cameras? We're talking, I said. She struggled for air the way swimmers do in water they thought would cradle them. Grant is under pressure, she said. The business things got away from us. I know I sounded cold. I have been cold. I hate that. The kids love you. I love you. We can fix this if we just fix what I asked. The numbers. The way you practiced removing me from your life and called it logistics. You don't have to perform regret for me, Lila. If you want to grow it, you'll need time, not microphones. Tears made a bright line and clung surface tension doing its quiet work. You're ruining us, she whispered. No, I said. I'm letting in the math show. You can't be ruined by a woman who finally says her name at her own gate. She swallowed, nodded once like someone agreeing with a sentence that stings, and stepped back. If you change your mind, she said, and left the rest unsaid, because what she meant was, if you stop being yourself. I slept with the lamp off for the first time in months, not because I wasn't afraid of the dark, but because the dark in my rooms now belonged to me. Morning brought consequences like mail, predictable and less dramatic than the sender intended. There were messages from numbers I didn't recognize, reporters wanting more, neighbors offering casseroles, a pastor asking if I'd be willing to share a testimony. Franklin texted that the lottery authority had scheduled our appointment for early next week. He also forwarded a short, tidy email from a local station requesting comment from the family. He wrote, "You are not required to respond. If you wish to, one sentence will do. Short sentences are traps only when you don't choose them." I wrote back, "No further comment until claim is processed. Thank you for understanding." By noon, a different knock, the sort of efficient tap-tap that belongs to men who serve papers and women who sell table linens. I opened the door to find an officer in a gray uniform, polite hat in hand. "Ma'am," he said, "we had a call about a domestic disturbance last night." He glanced past me at the neat table, the kettle. "We are required to make contact." "There was a disturbance," I said, "but it was of expectations, not peace." He smiled quickly despite himself, then recovered. "If anyone in the main house tries to pressure you to relinquish property, call us." "I have a lawyer," I said, "and a flower tin." "Good combination," he said, tipped his hat and left. By afternoon, the vans had thinned to one stubborn camper with a long lens. I packed 2 boxes, one labeled books and another labeled what I thought I'd never get to keep. Into the second, I put the blue quilt from the old townhouse, the framed photo of Harold laughing, with his head tipped back, a wooden spoon worn smooth at the edges by soups that fed other people's celebrations. At dusk, Franklin called. 2 things, he said. 1, the trust is fully formed. 2, a friend who runs a reputable complex by the river has a vacancy, 2 bedrooms, good light neighbors who understand the difference between solitude and isolation. No pressure, but if you want, we can look tomorrow. Yes, I said before the part of me trained to wait could wake up. Let's look. When I hung up, I stood in the doorway and watched the light die over the magnolia. Behind me, my boxes made small, earnest shapes on the floor. In the main house, voices rose and fell, Grant's sharp, Lila's threadbare. A car door slammed. A dog barked elsewhere, nothing to do with us, a hymn to a different life. I thought of Aunt Beatrice's quiet money the way floors matter in houses and lives. I thought of the girl on the swing behind the ticket, gapped tooth and fearless legs pumping as if air were something you could climb if you decided to. I thought of the question the young reporter asked, "What will you do next?" and felt with a certainty that was neither ecstasy nor vengeance, the answer unfolding in a series of small words anyone can learn to say: choose, pack, sign, move, live. When the knock came this time, it wasn't hesitant or officious. It was Teresa holding takeout and masking tape and a black marker fat enough to write truth on cardboard. "Labeler-in-chief," she said, stepping in as if she'd been doing it all her life. "Where do we start?" "Books," I said. "Always the books." We worked until the tape dispenser ran out of teeth. Somewhere around box 8, Teresa paused, looked at me over the top of a stack of paperbacks and said, "You know you didn't set this fire." "I know," I said, "but I'm allowed to be warmed by it." We laughed, that amazed private laugh women develop when survival turns into something more than endurance. When she left, the rooms looked lighter, not because there were fewer things in them yet, but because a decision makes even crowded spaces breathable. I checked the lock, washed the 2 cups we'd used, and set them upside down on a towel. My phone buzzed on the table. A message from an unknown number. "We need to talk about what you've done to this family." No name attached, just the assertion that I owed them a conversation that would serve their script. I turned the phone face down, then off a small and radical hush. Tomorrow there would be leases to read, keys to collect signatures that could not be forged, my name making the ink honest. Tonight there was the soft sound of a river I couldn't see from here, but could almost hear if I let the house be quiet enough. I went to the window and looked past the porch toward the gate. The cameras were gone. The iron was just iron again. Across the yard, the big house glowed the way big houses glow when their owners keep flipping switches trying to light a room they cannot name. Soon, I told the dark. Soon I'll be gone from these rooms and not from myself. Then I turned out the lamp and let the night do what it does best. When you let it belong to you, fold itself around you like a right-sized coat. The apartment by the river didn't try to impress me. That was its grace. No chandelier, no grand foyer, just clean light pale walls and windows that opened to a ribbon of water moving at its own pace. The manager, Ms. Alvarez, walked us through the rooms with a practical kindness that felt like permission rather than sales. 2 bedrooms, she said, tapping a clipboard. A quiet building. People keep to themselves, but they knock if you cough. Elevators work, the balcony gets morning sun. Franklin stood back, letting me choose. I stepped into the second bedroom, the one that would hold books and a small desk, and ran a hand along the sill. Paint dusted my fingertips. Imperfect, honest. "I'll take it," I said. We signed what needed signing. The trust would cover the deposit and first months until the claim processed. Franklin arranged the utilities. Ms. Alvarez handed me 2 keys on a blue tag and said, "Welcome home," like the end of a benediction. Moving took less time than I feared, and more care than I'd been afforded in a year. Teresa showed up with a hand truck and coffee. The mail carrier offered boxes from his truck. I loaded my life into the back of her hatchback books, labeled and relabeled the blue quilt. A wooden spoon the